Well, it's about damn time. Seriously, this is like my second time recording this now. It's taking for fucking ever. We all have our first video game, and for me that video game is none other than Spyro the Dragon. Released in 1998 for the PlayStation 1, the conception of Spyro the Dragon came about after Crash 3 Warped. Series developer Naughty Dog had been contracted by Universal Interactive Studios to design and create a trilogy of mascot platforming games that could compete with the likes of Mario or Sonic, which, as we all know, became Crash Bandicoot. Insomniac Games were chosen for the job, a relatively fresh-faced developer who had just gotten done with their new FPS game, Disruptor. It was decided that the character in question would be a dragon, as one of the dev team members liked dragons. Really that simple. Once again, enrolling Crash character designer Charles Dembillas, the dragon was christened Spyro, and thus a legend was born. The adventure begins with the residents of the Dragon Kingdom being interviewed. Who's interviewing them? How do these dragons have cable? These are the questions that, sadly, we'll never get the answer to. Nasty Nork has encased all of the dragons in crystal, all except for one. Why? Because they called him ugly on live TV. I believe this is what the kids call getting cancelled. As our plucky young hero, it's your job to free each and every dragon, as well as take back all of the stolen treasure. Now, you might not believe me when I say this, but this little game here called Spyro the Dragon is actually far more revolutionary than one might expect. Former president of Universal Interactive Studios, Mark Cerny, expressed great interest in developing a game where interaction with the enemies is the key focus. You think back to older platformers of the time, most of their enemies were very static, often only having one walk cycle or one means of attack. In Spyro, it's not uncommon for enemies to have multiple behavioural traits. For example, in Peacekeepers, these Norks will try shooting at you with cannons when spotted. If they have nothing to attack you with, they'll duck straight into a tent. And perhaps my personal favourite, they'll cower in fear at the sight of you until you turn around, in which case they'll stick your ass out at you. Their big, thick, polygon ass. These animations play a vital role in communicating the best method of attack. As a dragon, Spyro can flame and charge things. So let's take this Nork here as an example. Silver-plated enemies or objects tells us that we can't flame it, but when we try to charge into it, he's too large, so that won't work either. Instead, what you need to do is look away from the Nork in order for him to flash his exposed back. There are plenty of other examples I could bring up, however I think you get the gist. Cerny's other desire was to do away with a lot of the fog seen in early 3D platformers. To do this, developers Brian and Alex Hastings created a system where the amount of detail rendered on an object would be calculated relative to its distance from Spyro. This allowed for a panoramic 3D view without putting too much strain on the PS1's processors, and subsequently tanking performance. Hey, you scoff, but it's something that Pokemon is still trying to figure out. Much of the game is built around the players being able to see great distances. Gems sparkle to indicate where they are even if their models aren't visible. Sparks the Dragonfly, your companion, changes colours to represent Spyro's current health without cluttering up the player's field of view with unnecessary HUD elements. He also gets his health back by eating butterflies that you get from sheep and other fodder. Don't ask me what that's about. Many of the challenges in Spyro are height based, often it's not a matter of where you need to go, more about finding how exactly you get there. Pressing the jump button in midair allows Spyro to glide. It was the belief of the devs that this increased draw distance would encourage players to fully explore each level and see just how far their glide would take them. Unlike other 3D platformers of the time, such as Banjo-Kazooie or Super Mario 64, which featured expansive playgrounds filled with various challenges, Spyro's levels are a lot more intimate in comparison. In addition, these worlds are often very linear, with only the occasional diversions. While this may seem disappointing at first, I actually find it to be one of Spyro the Dragon's greatest strengths. Every world has 5 levels, a boss level, a flying level, and 3 standard collectathon levels. The worlds being smaller means that it's much easier to collect everything, so even if I am missing that one goddamn gem, it's easy to retrace my steps and figure out exactly what I missed. Having the levels go by so quickly not only helps with the pacing, but also keeps the Spyro trilogy feeling fresh. The best collectathons, to me anyway, are the ones that feel invigorating to play despite actually accomplishing very little. Mario Odyssey, for example, you've got like what, fucking £1,000 moons, but I never get tired of collecting all of them because they're just so goddamn fun to do. Like, you get little shots of dopamine on a frequent basis. Most levels in these games take up to about 10 minutes, but I still feel like I'm making a great deal of progress regardless. The act of collecting these trinkets in and of itself is also highly relaxing. I haven't even mentioned my favourite part of the game yet, the flying levels. In order to complete the course and net all the treasure, you must destroy all the obstacles in one run. Hitting the water or running out of time is an instant failure, and clearing an obstacle replenishes some of your time. These levels do attempt to give you a set path, however following it will result in you barely being able to make it. The fun of these levels comes when going against the flow and piecing together your own optimal route through trial and error. I love arcadey type games because as brutal as they can be sometimes, they can feel so good to master, and Spyro's flight levels are a grade A example of this. The flight levels would return for 2 and 3, but I'm just going to say it right now, I believe they were done best in this game, which is one of the only things I can say is best about the first game. So far I've basically just been gushing about how much I love this game, and while yes, it is true, I do love this game, certain parts of it have seen better days. The controls, for example, are much worse than I remember, and when I say that I'm not even comparing it to its remake, no, I'm comparing it to the other PS1 Spyro games. It really does not control that well at all. It's hard to explain control feel unless you've actually had first-hand experience, so I'll do the best I can. Spyro's moving and turning speed in this game is about as graceful as walking knee-deep in mud, whereas when you're charging it's the exact opposite. He's as light as a feather and he loses any semblance of traction. This harsh juxtaposition makes it hard to feel like you're ever in control of Spyro. It's quite clear to me that they didn't quite know how to handle a quadruped in 3D. Even now, Spyro's unique in that regard. Unfortunately, I feel like they sacrificed too much flexibility in favour of realistic weight. It's certainly manageable, hell, on a first playthrough you might not even notice. Play 2 or 3 after this though, and it's a much different story. I praised the worlds earlier for its ever so addicting loop of collecting gems through succinct level design. However, if I were to take a step back and ask you to name a level from any point in the game barring the first couple, I'm willing to bet that you couldn't. Each hub lays out a specific theme that all future levels in said hub will adopt. The problem is that the other levels don't really do much to set themselves apart and end up coming off as extensions to the hub. Let me show you what I mean. World 1 is the Artisans, your standard green first level type area. Dark Hollow is Artisans, but at night. Stone Hill is just Artisans again, but the only one in this particular area to have any kind of individuality is Town Square, which, as luck would have it, is actually one of my favourites due to its vastly different architecture and killer theme tune. This continues throughout the majority of the game. Most of the worlds will have one fairly unique level, and the rest being slight variations. Cliff Town is just Peacekeepers, only you go a bit higher. Lofty Castle is just Dreamweavers, only with a bigger castle. This isn't a problem on its own, but when put up against the sheer variety of worlds in 2 and 3, it gets a bit samey. I love how they use portals to mask the loading times, that's really clever, but what's the point of using portals if you're not going to utilise the creative freedom it presents? That's just from an art design standpoint. Let's compare Spyro to another classic collectathon that just so happened to be released the same year. Banjo-Kazooie has a paltry 9 levels in comparison to our purple friend. However, within these levels we find varied challenges, all sorts of colourful characters to interact with, landmarks to explore, etc. Only by interacting with the different inhabitants, getting to know them, and helping them out with their problems do you truly appreciate these worlds for what they really are. These aren't levels to be platformed across, they're a home for these creatures that you just so happen to be visiting. Now, if we go back to Spyro, you don't really get any of that. You go in, you do your business, and you go. I suppose you could count the dragons you rescue as interacting with inhabitants, but that is being very, very generous. Look, unless you count telling me shit I already know, or
thank you for releasing me,
this interaction, then okay.
Spyro, it's great to see you, but I've got to go.
Well, fuck you too. Most of the time you're just collecting gems with no standout challenges to go along with it. I think this is why Treetops is the most infamous out of all these levels, because it tests you way more than anything before and after. High Caves introduces us to supercharge ramps. Charge along the marked path and for a time, you too can become Sonic the Hedgehog. In its introductory level, the devs decided to essentially get rid of bottomless pits, allowing you to experiment freely. Treetops feels like a culmination of everything you learned from those introductory levels. It not only tests you on your platforming and ability to maintain speed by chaining ramps together, but also your observatory skills. Before you even start charging, you need to figure out exactly which ramps go to where in order to get those tough to reach gems. The supercharged ramps are one of very few recurring gimmicks in Spyro the Dragon, and it's one I wish we could have seen more of. All of the levels with it are highlights for sure. Collectathons on their own could be a very hard sell for some people because you're essentially asking the player to spend their time picking up worthless shit. Chores, essentially. As a result, it's important for any game of this nature to establish the primary function of each of its collectibles. How will they individually contribute to your quest? Banjo-Kazooie almost immediately establishes that Jiggies are needed to open new worlds. You get those by helping people. Notes are needed to unlock new moves from bottles. If you unlock the Talon Trot and go further into the lair, you'll also learn that they're needed to break note doors. Then you have your secondary collectibles like Jinjos, Feathers, Eggs and Mumbo tokens. While not important on their own, they are necessary in collecting Jiggies. Doesn't Spyro have this too? Well, yeah, kind of. Let's break it down. There are three primary collectibles in Spyro the Dragon. We have the crystallized dragons, which can be seen as your power star equivalent. There's gems, and then there's a handful of dragon eggs you get by chasing thieves. Now pretend that you've never played the game before. From what you watched of the intro, you can assume that dragons hold some importance. The only significance the gems hold is one line and that's it. As for dragon eggs, they're literally dropped halfway through the game. In order to clear a world and move on to the next hub, you need to make sure that you've collected a certain amount of a specified collectible. As a kid, this would lead to situations where I would ignore the gems, free the dragons, and then get stuck in the second hub. I would then lose interest and go to play Spyro 2 or 3. Granted, if you're getting everything, it doesn't matter either way, but the point being is that these roadblocks could have been avoided if each collectible had its own function that feeds into progression, rather than one loose shared one. I've neglected to mention the bosses because they're shit. They're really, really shit. These guys are so pathetic that they barely qualify as bosses. In fact, I'm pretty sure Robotnik in Sonic 1 is more intimidating than these guys. Does this look challenging to you? In fact, one of them blows so hard he's even called Blowhard. No. Spyro the Dragon is a fine game, a run-of-the-mill 3D platformer. Despite all the nostalgia I have for it, I would honestly play Banjo or Mario 64. Those games excelled with their interesting worlds, great controls, continually escalating challenges, and lovable characters, all things that Spyro's lacking in. If Banjo's an A+, then Spyro would be a B-, a solid first attempt that with a little bit of tweaking could lead to something great. Now this is what I call a sequel. Spyro 2 Ripto's Raid, or Gateway's Glimmer depending on where you're from, came out in 1999, a 1-year turnaround for Insomniac, and boy, what a turnaround it was. This is by far the fan favourite of the series. Let's find out why. Spyro 2 starts with Spyro taking a holiday to Dragon's Shores, but instead ending up in a whole new world, Avalar. He's summoned by the inhabitants to deal with an evil tyrant named Ripto, who has escaped from his own world after a failed experiment. He also hates dragons. Spyro in this game has a new voice actor. Before he was voiced by Carlos Alazraqui, who, while not bad, was more cute and lacked the fiery attitude that Insomniac clearly intended for him to have. His replacement is none other than Tom Kenny. Yes, that one. Spyro's more cheeky now, and with a more expanded cast to play off of, he's much more of a character. Greg Berger's Ripto though, I love him. He's the perfect amount of camp, so pathetic and over the top that you can't help but love him and everything he does.
Boo.
Ah! Why you?
I love the banter that goes on between him and Spyro.
You may have been able to defeat that simpleton, but Gulp will be more than a match for you.
Bring it on, shorty!
Spyro, he's taller than you dopey git. I would show you more of the cutscenes, but my disc is pretty old and it ended up coming out like a really shit YouTube poop.
There's no way you can get. Look, there's no way you can get. Ripto and his monsters have taken over. Ripto and his monsters have taken over. Like to, but I've got to go check. I'd like to, but I've got to go check. He's still trying to fix the super portal, so he's still trying to fix the super portal, so
That sounds interesting.
Well, I tried. You little fools!
So what's changed to make Spyro 2 the great follow-up that it is? Well, for one thing, the control is actually good now. They've made his walking and turning speed faster and his charge a tad slower, ergo less slippery. It doesn't feel like I'm constantly fighting with the game to go in the direction I want to go. The hover has been introduced to circumvent unfair deaths caused by overly precise jumps, activated with the press of the triangle button. On top of that, Spyro can learn some new abilities by paying new character money bags. Such abilities include swimming, climbing and head bashing. For one, gems have become much more significant and desirable to collect. The extra abilities aid in creating more interesting world design and diverse challenges. Oh yes, Spyro 2 has those now as well. The extra challenges were something that the first game desperately needed. None of them are particularly challenging per se, but they do spice up things regardless, and some of them can even be quite fun. Then there are those missions, you know, those kind of missions, the missions that just make you wanna... Oh. There's this mission where you have to guide an alchemist to free Hunter from Stone. The only issue is that said alchemist is as blind as a bat and likes to walk in front of enemies. You can't kill them, all you can do is stun them, and if he gets hit once, that's mission failed. It's not hard, it's just tedious trial and error garbage and a complete waste of time. The trolley mission, oh lord help me, the trolley mission. In this one you need to collect 50 gears scattered on a track. If you so much as touch anything but track, the mission is over. And if that wasn't bad enough, you have to listen to this big bollock say this
Trouble with the trolley, eh?
every time you fail. My most hated mission though is the popcorn mission in Magma Cone. Oh boy, where do I begin? There are 2 rounds to this one. The first one is a piece of piss, not even worth talking about. The second round though, that's where things get a bit spicy. The goal of this game is simple. There'll be crystals popping out of the ground, and all you need to do is grab 15 of them before Hunter. Somehow, Hunter always knows where the next one's going to pop out, and he's almost always in the optimal position to grab it. Meanwhile, I'm running around like a headless chicken trying to get a single point. In the end, I just decided to stalk him and steal the crystal from underneath him whenever one showed up. Call me the Pussy Crusher. Cause you just got fucked! In Spyro 2, these worlds feel a lot closer to what I was talking about with Banjo. For starters, every world you visit is fully unique. I've always found the portal system to be ingenious, not just as a way of masking load times, but also as an excuse to vary up level themes without it coming off as jarring, like, say, Sonic Lost World for instance. Unlike the first game, I can practically name every single level. Each world has 2 different cutscenes, one to show the current predicament and the other to show how the people of said world are getting on after the fact. I like these for a few reasons. For one, it makes the worlds feel a lot more lived in, like there's more going on even when Spyro's not there. It also helps that a lot of these are pretty funny and endear you to the characters all the more. Each world has its own culture, its own ecosystem. You feel much more like a tourist, never quite knowing what you'll see next. In one world you could be helping some monks win a game of ice hockey, and in another you could be helping Hunter train his pet manta ray. Breeze Harbor and Zephyr are my favourite examples of this. The inhabitants within these worlds are at war with one another. You're seeing the same conflict play out from 2 different perspectives. I wonder if Spyro's committed any war crimes. Point being that these worlds actually have some personality to them now. Speedways remain more or less the same as they were before, with the majority being unlocked with orbs you get from challenges. They still contain a fair degree of non-linearity, and some of the later ones can be pretty tricky, but I don't think they match the nail-biting thrill of the first game. On top of the obstacle course, each speedway has 1 additional challenge by finding a hidden character. Most of these I actually find more difficult than the course itself. That cat burglar mission always gives me a hard time. Still, if you thought they were too tough the first time around, I think Spyro 2 speedways are a lot more balanced with the rest of the game, even if I personally enjoyed the challenge. Interestingly enough, there are death times which, if beaten, reward you with a skill point. Skill points are essentially achievements before achievements existed. They can be found in most Insomniac games, specifically Spyro and Ratchet & Clank. They're given to you by doing something very specific, and just like achievements, they don't contribute to much of anything. They're just an optional thing you can do if you really like the game. Hell, in Spyro 2's case, the game doesn't even tell you when you got one. The only clue you get is this small jingle. Spyro 2 only has 3 bosses, Ripto and his 2 lackeys Crush and Gulp. These are perhaps some of the best bosses I've played in a 3D platformer. They're decently challenging, they switch things up often, and above all, they're just fun to fight. The final battle against Ripto, while not the hardest thing in the world, is one of the most enjoyable finales to any video game. There are 3 phases to this fight. The first 2 consist of you collecting orbs. For every 3 you collect, you're granted one of 3 special powers: Supercharge, Super Flame, and Explosive Breath. This being the only way you can damage Ripto. Where this gets fun is that Ripto himself can pick up these orbs and use them against you, so you're constantly having to choose between giving up an orb or risk putting yourself in the line of fire just to snatch one from underneath him. The final phase is an aerial dogfight, which, while not quite as frantic as the rest of the fight, is still a tremendously fun way to end the game. Spyro 2 still has some issues, however. Backtracking is now a thing, and I'd argue it's to the game's detriment. There are certain collectibles that you can only get once you've learnt a move from moneybags in another homeworld. Thing is that in many cases this only accounts for 1 or 2 missions per homeworld. The Gobi's Valley / Freeze's Peak approach to backtracking, if you will. I'm not fully against the idea of backtracking if the game is designed around it, say Banjo-Tooie is a good example. The issue is that the majority of the side missions they choose to make you backtrack for don't even make use of the abilities that they forced you to get in the first place, in which case, what's the point? Also, in most cases, you have to complete the entire level again, since most of them have no shortcuts or warp points to the exit. There's also this very weird mechanic involving power-ups. Enemies don't give you gems anymore, instead their essence is used to unlock a power-up challenge. This isn't bad on its own, but if one of the backtrack missions also happens to involve a power-up, it just compounds the issue even further. Then there's the case of the Alchemist mission. Wait, didn't we already talk about this? Yes. On top of being an annoying mission in its own right, finishing this mission unlocks a separate mission with Hunter requiring the head bash, which isn't unlocked till the next hub. So you beat Gulp, you go to Winter Tundra, you unlock the head bash, you go back to Hunter only to find out he's still stuck in rock. Yes, you have to do the Alchemist mission again. Fuck me. Easily one of the worst implementations of backtracking I've ever seen in a video game. It's the reason why I can't stand Fracture Hills. We spoke a little bit last time about the value of your collectibles, and I'm happy to say that the gems no longer have this issue. The orbs, on the other hand, orbs are awarded to the player by completing the different challenges. Thing is that they don't really come into play until the final battle of Ripto, requiring you to collect 40 out of the 64, well over half. Up till this point all they did was unlock new speedways, which if you're not going for 100%, you'd be hard pressed to care. For the first 14 worlds, all you're required to do is receive a talisman by getting to the end of the world. You can fight the boss at the end of the home world by collecting all the talismans. Winter Tundra replaces the talismans for orbs. So I ask you, what's the point of the talismans if you're ultimately going to fall back on the orbs anyway? Why not just unlock each boss fight by collecting a set amount of orbs? Lastly, and this is just a personal thing, but the orbs don't really feel that satisfying to collect. The challenges to get them, yeah, they're fun, but the actual act of collecting them themselves feels very... Compare that to Banjo or the 3D Mario games. You get a cute little animation or a cheeky jingle that just makes you feel, oh, so accomplished, even if you haven't actually done anything. In conclusion, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage isn't a perfect sequel. It is, however, a bloody good one. This game is much more challenging, has richer worlds, controls a lot better, introduces many lovable characters, as well as giving Spyro more of a personality. If you want to start playing Spyro games, this is your jumping in point. This is classic Spyro in its purest form and a fantastic follow-up for this budding series. Insomniac coming at you again with a 1-year turnaround. When it comes to Year of the Dragon, you're either in one of two camps. You either think that this game is the best in the trilogy, or you think it's a lackluster end to an otherwise great series. Those last people were wrong and you shouldn't be friends with them. Kidding. You can be friends with them if you want to. I often see Spyro 3 criticised as a derivative sequel, and while it doesn't do anything spectacular with the formula, what it does do is polish it to a mirror sheen, not too dissimilar to other popular third entries. The sorceress is attempting to achieve eternal youth by killing infant dragons and tearing off their wings. Jesus. Spyro and Hunter must travel to the Forgotten Dragon worlds in order to retrieve the dragon eggs and finally get some peace. On appearances, the sorceress seems like a much more formidable foe than either of the last game's antagonists. However, what they had was a more memorable personality. Ripto's banter with Spyro, as underutilised as it was, made it really satisfying to knock him down a peg. The story is fine for a platformer, however it's clear why both Ripto and Nasty Naught returned for future games, whereas the sorceress didn't. To the game's credit though, it's easily the funniest of the trilogy. All of the characters in general just have more witty things to say. Moneybags, oh my god, Moneybags. He's gone from a grubby little turd to a grubby little turd that makes me laugh on occasion.
You shouldn't anger a magician, Spyro. I just might decide to turn you into a blue hedgehog or something.
Say that again, I fucking dare you. A large reason why I enjoy Year of the Dragon over Ripto's Rage is that I just prefer the worlds in this game. Spyro 2 had worlds that I really liked, however there were moments, particularly in the latter half of the game, where the worlds weren't as strong as the others that came before. Year of the Dragon not only has the most memorable worlds from an art design standpoint, an Italian villa, a fireworks factory slash ninja dojo, a factory that manufactures weather, and a fairy tale mashup world, just to name a few highlights. They're also designed a lot better too, specifically from the perspective of backtracking. Spyro himself hasn't undergone any major changes from last time. All of his abilities from 2 remain, and he doesn't gain any new ones. In interviews, the devs explained that by the time they got to the third game they were running out of ideas to expand the formula. They go on to explain that other platforming characters had the option of holding things like guns. Their solution was to take a page out of Sonic's book. Add a bunch of shitty friends. There are 5 of them in total, so let's go down the list. Sheila the kangaroo. Out of all of them, she's probably the most uninteresting, as she controls the most like Spyro, only she can jump really high. Sergeant Bird is my favourite, having the ability to fly indefinitely, shoot rockets and carry things. Bentley's slow and has a massive club. Finally, Agent 9 shows us just how bad Insomniac wanted to make a third-person shooter because it's literally just prototype Ratchet and Clank. For as clunky as Agent 9 is, especially when compared to modern twin-stick shooters, I kind of end up finding him fun regardless. His bullets can ricochet, so in tight spaces you can pretty much kill everything without even having to aim, it's nuts. Sparks the Dragonfly also gets his time to shine with 4 top-down shooter levels, 1 for each homeworld. I haven't really played many games of this type, so I can't really comment on how well it stacks up. What I can say is that these are fun and forgiving enough to where a noob like me can enjoy them. When it comes to multiple characters, you either think that they distract from the core of the game, or you think that they're a nice change of pace. I'm of the latter opinion. I like this approach to backtracking better because you can still get everything in Spyro's section of the level. Even when you do have to backtrack, it's always for something new. Furthermore, completing every level now unlocks a shortcut that loops back to the start of the level, so it's pretty much perfect. I don't really find the extra characters to be all that intrusive. Most of the time you take control of them to do 1 or 2 challenges and then you're back to Spyro. Spyro is still the majority of this game. You can also warp to any level after you've beaten the game. What the fuck is the point? Furthermore, in Spyro 2, sparks could point you in the direction of gems by holding down the shoulder buttons. That can still be done in 3, however you need to beat half of Sparks' levels first. Since the levels are segmented, you've got no way of knowing which part of the level has the last handful of gems. 2 just cut down on a lot of the fluff, and I'm not sure why they changed that. The challenges are so much better than the ones in 2. Having entire areas dedicated to them means that they can be more involved. Want an example? Look no further than the skate parks. These are so goddamn fun. Everyone seems to have a problem with the Bentley boxing mission, and I thought I did too until I decided just to stand there in the corner and mash the square button. First try. Not even joking. Enchanted Towers is probably my favourite level in the entire Spyro series, and not just for the aforementioned skate park. You get to fly around and explore the entire level as my favourite character, Sergeant Bird. Literally, I spent hours in this level just dicking about. I just love it so much. With the Dragon Eggs now being the main collectible, Spyro has finally achieved the same gameplay loop as Banjo. Clearing the levels gets you access to the next hub. In order to unlock said levels you need eggs, and in order to fully explore them you're going to need gems to pay off money bags. Boom. That's how we do it. Eggs are rewarding to collect, not just because of the cute animations, but the more you collect, the more flexibility you're allowed in terms of world order. Assuming you're not going for a complete run, you only need 100 out of the 149 possible dragon eggs in order to beat the game. There is a 150th one, but that's a secret. I think that Spyro 3 is generally the easiest of the trilogy. Even the missions that did give me trouble didn't aggravate me nearly as much as in 2. Speedways are now a shell of their former self. Can you go in a straight line? Well then you too can beat the speedways in Spyro 3. Seriously, I've seen Sonic Forces levels with more complex design than this. Okay, I'm exaggerating slightly. They're not awful, but they're nowhere near as satisfying as the first 2 games. Along with the Hidden Hunter missions, you've also got races. These are fun, I just wish they were a little less rigid on where you're allowed to go. Something to work on for a possible Spyro 4 perhaps. Wink wink. I hold the same opinion on the bosses as I do with the speedways. They're perfectly fine, but I honestly preferred Spyro 2's Rogues Gallery in terms of character and challenge. They're over far too quickly to leave any kind of impression, but still challenging enough to not hit Spyro 1 levels of mindless. In conclusion, Spyro 3 is the culmination of everything Insomniac learned from over the trilogy. While some may not take to the extra gameplay styles, the core Spyro gameplay is the best it's ever been. Honestly, my preference for this over 2 is just the little things. The gap in quality is minuscule compared to the gulf between 1 and 2. Sarcastic jokes aside, I do understand why a lot of people might not take to many of the ideas present in this game, especially when some have aged better than others. Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon is one of my top 5 favourite games of all time. It has my favourite worlds, the most fun gameplay, and my favourite soundtrack. Whether you like 2 or 3 better really doesn't matter, they're both great games and both worth a play. I think we can all agree on that. I couldn't possibly do a video on the Spyro trilogy without mentioning the composer of one of the PS1's most iconic scores, Stuart Copeland of Police fame. I'm not a music guy, so I can't give you an in-depth breakdown on how these tracks work or how they make you feel. What I can say is that when I hear these songs, I know it's from Spyro. That perfect blend of percussion and bass that characterises these levels. Cool, catchy, and yet strangely whimsical at the same time. One of my favourites will always be the credits theme, as you reflect on all the places you've been to, that bittersweet feeling of triumph and sadness to a journey's end. The Spyro the Dragon trilogy would go on to sell millions, becoming a flagship franchise for the PlayStation like Crash had done before. Insomniac Games would go on to be a bit of a critical darling. Spider-Man PS4 was my favourite game of that year, and although I never grew up with the series, Ratchet & Clank are some of the best games I have ever played. As for Spyro, well, if you thought Sonic had a hard time in the mid-2000s, you do not know true pain. Unfortunately, if you want to play the Spyro games in their original form, you're going to need either a PS3, Vita, or original disc, although as I'm saying this there are rumours floating about that the PS3 and Vita store are closing down soon, so yeah, it's good to see that the game industry is spot on, always on top with preservation. As always, they're doing a bang up job. Absolutely fantastic, well done. But what if you wanted to play Spyro on something more modern? Well, check back next time and we'll talk about the Spyro Reignited trilogy.